limited to 10 minutes. At your request, if individuals are speaking on the same topic, they all have 3 minutes each to speak, and so we deleted that. I want again to note what the major changes were, or the major items in the proposed rules. The first is to determine who can place items on the agenda. We've talked about a few times that there have been some concerns as to how we do that and do that in a consistent manner, and so the proposal is that the mayor, manager, attorney, or clerk, or any 2 members of council can place an item on the agenda. And the reason, again, for those that may not remember or those who are watching this meeting, the reason we suggested 2 members or more of council is that under state law, 2 members can call for a special meeting. So we viewed it as if 2 members can call for a special meeting, 2 members should be able to add an item to an agenda.
Well, that's always been, has it not?
It has been.
Yeah,
We just want to make sure that.
Not a change.
But in terms of the agenda, there's been no clear rule. So the mayor's always had the opportunity, the manager has, and then I think when the attorney or clerk have requested, but we're just putting those out there to make it absolutely clear who gets the right to place an item on the agenda or how it gets on there. If you don't use that process, then at a meeting, the mayor or council member can ask an item be added to a future agenda, and that happens unless someone objects. And if there's an objection, then you can just do it the way we have set it up, whereas the mayor, manager, attorney, clerk, or any 2 members of council can ask it to be put on the agenda. The only other thing is that the types of procedural motions that can be used at a meeting are specified in this. Happy to answer any questions the council has over these rules of procedure, anything in here that you have questions about, and what we're looking for is either more input today, or if council is satisfied with it, to go ahead and recommend that it be adopted to be effective before a future set of meetings. But happy to answer any questions.
One question. With respect to closed session,
Yes, ma'am.
does it give guidance as to what type of issues we should, ask to be put on special session for?
Not for a closed session, no, but if you want to add a closed session to the agenda,
That's
it would be
not
subject
on
to
that,
the same rules.
special session.
You mean a special meeting?
Yeah.
Then no, there's no guidance there, but that's also the same thing where any 2 members can call a special meeting, or the mayor can, and then whoever is requesting it can ask for certain items to be on the agenda. For example, if the mayor decided to call a special meeting, he could state, and what will be considered at this meeting will be the following item and nothing else. Or if any 2 members, then it would be the same thing under state law. Okay. So it doesn't say it in there, but we see that as the way that the agenda rule is set up, is that if you can call a meeting, you can decide what's on the agenda as well.
Okay, then I am asking, with regards to closed session, it does not speak to that.
It doesn't have to, ma'am, because there are only the items under state law that you can have a closed session for. Okay. So what you could do is call a special meeting to have a closed session, but it has to be one of the items permitted under 143-318.11 of the general statutes. So it could only be those.
143-318.11
of the general statutes, and those provide what can be. And if there's any question for what is considered appropriate or not appropriate for a closed session, we're always happy to work with you on that, which we've done with all council members.
How exclusive is that list? Is it very exclusive, or?
It's very exclusive. It limits you what you can do. For example, there's one that allows on personnel, one for, let's say if the council were awarding an honor to someone, that would be something, but also if you're doing economic development, things that you've used it for. And then also where you have to protect items that are protected under other provisions of state law. So those are the only ones that you can call. It doesn't allow you to pick something that's not on the list. If it's not on the list, you cannot hold a closed session.
Open session.
That must be done in an open session where the public would have an opportunity to see and appear and hear what's going on.
Okay. But you have to state that when requesting a closed session.
Yes, sir. What you would have to do is the motion, all meetings would have to start in open session. And then when you go in the closed session, you would of course have the motion, and it would state, here is the basis that I move that we go into closed session pursuant to NCGS section 143-318.11, A, and then whatever provision it's calling for. And there's other language. So that's why we can help you, because the clerk and I routinely have drafted what the closed session motion would be and to make sure that it complies with state law. So there's absolutely no doubt that you're properly entering into a closed session if you indeed need to do that.
And I will make a motion to approve the rules and procedures that will go into effect on January 9th, 2019.
Ma'am, if I could ask if you would allow us, because of the agenda rule in it, that instead of it being effective immediately, I'm looking at the clerk to seeing if we should have it effective for, if it would be better to be effective now or effective for the February meeting.
Okay, well, I'll amend the motion then, for our February meeting, to begin the February meeting.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion, second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that's passed.
I apologize, we didn't prepare a resolution for that, but I think the clerk and I will work towards making sure that it's out there for everyone's consideration. And we'll make sure you have the final version, which will be this, but removes the draft watermark that you see on every page. So it's available for your review and so you have it for our meetings.
All right, item 2 on the agenda, the state legislative agenda for 2019 long session. I'll give that to you again, sir.
Yes, sir. At the last meeting, we provided to you the proposed legislative agenda for the upcoming long session. In fact, the General Assembly convenes tomorrow. They do that for just a session where they select leaders, adopt rules, and then they will adjourn for a period of time until the end of the month. So this is the opportunity for the city to pull together its legislative agenda for the long session. And we presented this to you back in December, and at your request that we moved it to the January meeting for full consideration. I think one important thing to note is that unlike the prior General Assemblies that we've had since 2010, you no longer have a General Assembly with supermajorities. So it has, as I think some stories have even pointed out in the media, it is going to impact how the General Assembly does its business. So what we have done is we have taken the agenda that you've seen from us typically in the past, and we've pared it down to hit a few important points, because we honestly can't say to you that we think the General Assembly will do this or will do that. Typically your agenda has been reactive in a lot of ways to make sure that we preserve authority, but there have been a few areas where the city has said we need to be proactive on it. And in terms of this year, I think it's 2 items. One is the prepared food and beverage tax. And that is something that came to us from the Tourism Development Authority. They made a request last year that as the city continues to work on building the Science Center and renovating the Center Theater, funding operations for both are a challenge and an opportunity. And the idea is that while you could construct the Center Theater or renovate the Center Theater and construct the Science Center with funding that we have on hand, it does take up most of the tourism taxes that the city has. So you don't have the opportunity to then have funding sources available for other projects, and also for funding sources for maintenance later on. So the thought would be that there would be a 1% tax charged to customers that obtain prepared food and beverage. And the analysis that we had suggested that it could raise a low of $200,000 a year to maybe as high as $500,000 a year. We think that staff feels that the revenue in the area, $300,000 to $325,000 per year, may be a more reasonable estimate. What we have suggested is that this would go to the General Assembly for the request that the city have the authority to conduct a referendum for that. And the referendum would likely be held perhaps this November. So there are several questions whether or not the council wishes to move forward with this, if it feels it is appropriate. And it will also, the referendum would likely fall in November, meaning it would also fall at the time that we have municipal elections. So that's a consideration for the council as well. What we have been told by members of the General Assembly is that they believe that they would be able to support it and it could move forward, but we can't guarantee with the current environment, what would take place with the General Assembly. There have been concerns when cities have attempted to use a prepared food and beverage tax from members of the General Assembly, but other times they've been supportive of it. The fact that the council wisely suggested that this would be decided by a referendum of Monroe citizens, and that only if approved by those citizens would it be levied, is something that has been appreciated by the General Assembly. So that is a significant issue where we truly need to hear from the council if it wishes to move forward with that. If you do, and it's part of the agenda, we would likely bring in perhaps an outside lobbyist to assist us in that issue, because it is, I think, an important thing to council. It's one that we would work with someone that has a good relationship with our delegation and with the General Assembly to make sure that it was done and handled as smoothly as possible. That's the main issue out there for consideration. The other items that you have on there will be some of the more defensive items. Protecting municipal assets. We don't currently have a situation where someone would try to take the city's water system or the airport, but that has happened in other places, and so we again want to have the ability to oppose any legislation that would interfere with local management or ownership of local assets. We'd also want to make sure that local public utilities, that management of those by those who are here is protected as well. Local elections, you've seen some opportunities for the General Assembly to try to modify the way elections are done at the local level. We're asking that you authorize us to oppose attempts to unilaterally change when local elections are held, and whether or not those elections should be partisan or nonpartisan. We also are asking for items that allow us to protect municipal authority. There have been attempts to take away municipal authority in some areas, particularly building inspections, and we know now one bill that concerns us is the possibility that they will allow for third-party building inspectors to be out there that would be hired by the developers. And there's nothing like having, Dracula being in charge of the blood bank, is what you'd kind of see with that potentially. So we want to be able to deal with that issue as well. The other items that we'd want you to consider supporting are the advocacy goals from the League of Municipalities. Councilmember Anthony, Mayor Kilgore, and Councilmember McGee were all present at the Advocacy Goals Conference. Councilmember Anthony was our voting member there, and the city representatives participated and collectively voted, and it came up with the League's advocacy goals that are incorporated as well, and we'd also seek your support for those as well. I know I've spoken a lot, and I am happy to take any questions you may have.
On this legislation, I don't know if it's a two-part thing or not. And the reason I'm asking, can we vote on the part of the state legislative agenda and then come back another time and vote on where we want to do the referendum or not? And the reason I'm asking that, I just feel like everybody ought to be here when we vote on the referendum. Now, if they don't think so, that's okay with me. I'm ready to vote, but I'm just throwing this out. We down 3 people today, and if we're going to talk about a referendum, I think all 7 ought to be here to vote for that.
Mayor, you absolutely can. You can divide out that issue and say that the council would approve the agenda except for the prepared food and beverage tax.
Right.
And that's an item we can come back, because that's actually what we did last time.
Well, I don't
We had
want
a different one and added it later.
I don't want to hold up the legislative agenda, but if we can do it, and you just said we can. But it wouldn't hurt us to wait another month on this other part of it. But we can move on with the legislative agenda, and I think it would be good. But now, if the council wants to go ahead and vote on both of them, I don't have a problem with it.
And it would be fine. And just so as the mayor knows, the town and state dinner that the league is putting together again, which replaces town hall day, will be around the 20th of February. So if you act on that on the referendum at your February meeting, we'll be able to say that's part of the agenda. The only concern we would have, and we'll have a better idea perhaps later this week, of what the bill drafting deadlines and deadlines will be for submission of items. If they are deadlines that are going to come into play before that would be the reason why we would tell you that need to be considered before. But if that happens, we'll let you know, and if there's a need for a special meeting, which now, under the new rules, could come into play, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about the legislative agenda, them setting theirs, but I know exactly what you're saying now.
Yes, sir.
But my feeling is, I think the other three, the whole 7, would have opportunity to vote on this referendum. And again, I'm repeating myself, if you folks wanna go ahead and vote for all of it, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just throwing this out for discussion.
I would rather wait on all of them. I do have questions on possibility of a referendum. One part is, if we had to hire lobbyists, that's money, coming from the city. And we still would not know, have any inclination how they would vote. And my other question is, the advocacy, was that one of the items when we narrowed it down to 10 that was gonna be presented? Was that part of the package?
No, what they did have is the advocacy goals have locally controlled revenue options and flexibility. So it is something that's out there, but
Okay.
what you're asking for is independent of that, because the league will be asking for other locally controlled revenue options.
Right.
But it's likely that those are going to depend on, that's gonna sit there and say what it's available for. There's no way of knowing, is that gonna be something that makes it through this year or in the short session? So what we understood from council before is that you wished us to seek that, the prepared food and beverage tax referendum independently. But we are at council's pleasure on that, and we're happy to do it whatever way you need us to.
And, 2 other questions. We're gonna have, slight tax increase, right, coming up?
Well, I believe you already approved, I'm looking at the finance director, the city approved a property tax increase already effective July 1.
Of 2018.
Yeah, so that was already included.
We hadn't got anything proposed for this year.
We don't, okay.
Oh,
I didn't
that's
want to load the citizens up too much, with extra taxes and things.
No.
Well, the food, you're talking about with regard to the food and beverage tax?
Yes, sir.
But that will only be for the people that will be actually eating out and drinking
If
alcohol.
you eat out and spend $5, you pay a nickel.
Yeah.
All right.
$10 pay a dime.
One thing I would like to address with your question about the lobbying expenses, there's a reason why we'd suggest having a lobbyist, for this reason. Staff, can do this and handle a lot of this. However, because we work for you and we're here, we don't roam the halls of the General Assembly, we don't have the connections with all the members. We know our delegation, but I'm going to admit I don't know who the new chair of a particular, especially with the fact that the House Finance Committee chair lost his race for re-election. The lobbyists we have in mind would know those folks. And the expense on it would be limited because we haven't talked to the lobbyists we have in mind, but we would work towards limiting those funds, and those would be something the manager and I would work to identify funds available. But so we can't sit there and tell you we know it's going to be this much, but we think that if you want to give this, if you feel this is an appropriate thing to move forward on, and you want to have the best shot of it succeeding, that we want to make sure that the best possible effort is put out there, and that would include pulling in a lobbyist who has significant experience with the General Assembly and can help us get it done, because we can do this ourselves, but there's no guarantee that we would be able to get it across the finish line. We'd make a heck of a lot of progress, but to be honest, if you really want to guarantee that this is gonna play, we think that having a lobbyist would be a wise choice on it.
We wouldn't be able to tap into everything that needs to be tapped into,
I understand that.
like somebody on the inside. That's what.
Yeah, and that's why. So I know when you ask that question, I understand exactly that it's an additional expense, but if the council feels strongly about that, and we'll know obviously when you talk about it again in February, that would be, if that's what you end up doing, we're able to make sure that.
And we're talking about only prepared food and beverages.
That's right. So it won't be, you're not going to be at the grocery store and suddenly paying an additional tax on a head of lettuce, a bottle of salad dressing, some croutons, and some vegetables. But if you bought a salad that's already prepared, that's what you'd probably be paying. But it would also depend on how the General Assembly sets it up.
Okay.
So it'd be if you're going more to a restaurant and ordering a salad, well, then that would probably be what you're paying, but not if you're going.
One penny on the dollar.
Well, that's not bad. And what are our chances on getting the taxes, getting extra money on beer and wine?
Pretty.
We make more money doing that than.
We actually discussed that. That was a question raised by Councilmember Holloway at the beginning of the last session. And what we found out is that the opportunities to do that are, I would say, unlikely at best, but you never know. But that's something that we can work with the General Assembly. But in terms of that, there were discussions to whether or not other cities would try to do that, and they actually had not been moving forward on it because they had some serious concerns with doing it. Plus, the way the General Assembly, the way the structure, especially with the issues now about the alcohol sales in general with liquor sales, it's going to be problematic. So we couldn't guarantee that. That would not be a source that we would sit there and tell you, you could make, that you could bring in the same type of revenue with that. We couldn't guarantee that you'd even be given the ability to do that.
Question I've got is, I think there's only one other city in the state that has this, isn't that correct?
Prepared food and beverage tax? There are, I believe, a couple of others. There are several others. So I think what they've done is they've been able to do it, but it's not widespread.
Is it not widespread because the General Assembly doesn't pass it, or is it defeated at the polls in a referendum?
It both. And in some cases, some cities go ahead and choose to do it on their own. But the General Assembly has to give you the authority to do it. For example, Charlotte tried to seek that as a funding source for the renovations they were doing for Bank of America Stadium for the Panthers. The General Assembly at that time said, we will not bring this forward. And Charlotte's intention was not to put it as a referendum, but to go ahead and have the ability to levy it on their own. We believe that the reason, though, they chose to not move forward with it is because it was seen as benefiting an athletic facility as opposed to something else. So in this case, what we've been told is that we think there would be support for this, whereas it wasn't supported for that. It can be supported for things for cultural facilities. It just depends on what the mood of the General Assembly is.
I'm gonna move the table the motion on the state legislative agenda for 2019 long session until that February meeting, unless we find out that there's a deadline.
Well, Madam, what I would suggest is if the concern of the council, and I know Councilmember Holloway had a question, so I'll be short, is you have a question about the prepared food and beverage tax?
No, I mean, I wanted them all to hear all of the proposals.
In terms of all of the other ones that we had, those
Yes.
are, by the way, those are identical to ones you've had on your 2017 and 18 agendas, and I believe as far back as 2016. So I would point out that those are not new. And we would recommend that you go ahead and approve those in the event that in the first period of the General Assembly following at the end of the month, you start seeing bills introduced that try to take away local authority, and that would be our primary concern. When that's fine if you don't wish to do that, because then what we would do is just come to you with the concern and ask council, would you like us to oppose it, and we'd recommend it. So it is whatever the council wishes to do. If you wish to table the whole thing until February, that's fine as well. But I think that is your motion, but I believe Councilmember Holloway had a question.
I just had a question for Pete. What's your feel from the tourism board, especially the restaurateurs that are involved? I know this hasn't been brought up, but you kind of have a feel for,
Yes, sir.
because we need their support for this.
The tourism board is 100% in favor of this. Also, we went to the chamber and had preliminary discussions with the Chamber of Commerce last year, and their executive committee voted at that time to support us. Now, we haven't brought it back to them formally yet, but they haven't expressed any change in their support.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I think you do have a motion that's been made but not yet seconded to table the agenda to the February meeting.
That's your motion, Ms. Anthony, your motion.
I was making a motion to just table and give everybody an opportunity to vote on all of them.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That passed. We'll table that to the February meeting. Okay, item 3 is Fire Department Strategic Planning Process. Chief Fowler, we recognize you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. City Manager, I wanted to give Council an update and also give you an opportunity for input, if you like. One of the things that we do in the Fire Department is a strategic plan. As you know, we are accredited through the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, and one of the key elements in that accreditation process, and not just as part of the accreditation, but just a key element in us operating and planning for the future, is a strategic plan. You may recall we've actually done 2 in the past. We did one back in 2009, and then we did another one in 2014. So now we're doing another one. These are 5-year strategic plans. And just a little bit about that process. We have contracted with a branch of the Center for Public Safety Excellence. They have a technical advisory branch, and they'll actually come in and facilitate that development of the strategic plan. And I do have 2 gentlemen with us here today, Mr. Matt Keller and Mr. Brian Dean, that are both with the Center for Public Safety Excellence. But just tell you a bit about how that planning process works. It is what we refer to as a community-driven strategic plan, in that we get input from the community in developing that plan. So we actually held a session yesterday, held it down at the Monroe Country Club, and we had approximately 38 citizens that attended that session. And we asked them questions, or our gentlemen that are facilitating this, ask them questions, regarding what their expectations of the fire department are, any concerns that they may have with the fire department, what they feel like the strengths of the fire department are. So we get all that information back. We're able to look at it and see what the community would like to see, in the strategic plan over the next 5 years. We also ask that group to prioritize the services that we provide, what we refer to as our core services. There's 9 of those, and so it allows that group an opportunity to prioritize those services. So we have that data, and all that will be included in the plan that we will be developing. The other part of that is today, tomorrow, and Thursday, we have a group of what we refer to as internal stakeholders, members of our department representing really all ranks and stations in the department, to also give input into that plan. And we go through that, and we really reevaluate our mission statement, our core values, the vision for the department. We do a SWOT analysis where we look at what our strengths and weaknesses are in the department, and also any opportunities or threats, so that we bring all that information together. And then we also look at any service gaps that we may be aware of. And I know council's familiar, especially the Public Safety Committee, with the some of the service gaps that we've talked about in the past. So all of that will be considered as we start developing this plan. And then the key component of the plan is we develop goals and objectives that we will try to accomplish over the next 5 years. So that's just kind of an overview of the process and what will go into the plan. And as I said, I just wanted to give the council an opportunity for any input that you may have on things that, particularly if you have any concerns regarding the services that we're providing with the fire department, or anything that you want to see in the coming year that you would like to see in that plan. I just kind of wanted to, since this was a strategic meeting of council, just felt like it was a good timing to be able to bring this before council and allow that opportunity for discussion and any input that you may have. We will, once we draft this plan, we will bring it back to council. We'll actually bring it to Public Safety Committee, and then bring it back to council for adoption at a later time. So with that, I would like to introduce these 2 gentlemen, Matt Keller, Brian Dean. Gentlemen, is there anything that you would like to add that I haven't covered, you're welcome to if you like.
No, just other than, Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I just, or this afternoon, excuse me. Wanted to let you know it's a pleasure to be here in Monroe, North Carolina, working with the fire department. I live in New Hampshire, so you can imagine how thrilled I am. The weather is fabulous here. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So I am really pleased about being here. I don't really have much to add beyond what the chief said, other than one of the key components, and he talked about the community-driven aspect of this facilitation of this process, and the importance of the department aligning itself with those community expectations, those community priorities, and more importantly beyond that, how all those things in a strategic environment propagate up through the organization to the strategic level through executive staff to you here at council, so that you can help make those informed decisions, those actionable items that they're going to identify and apply to those objectives and critical tasking moving forward. So again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and let you know that we're very excited about working with the department and coming up with those strategic initiatives and associated objectives and tasks to help the organization move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you guys, gentlemen, coming.
Absolutely.
And we did get some very good input from the community yesterday, and we tried to get a representation of, of the city. One bit of data that Mr. Keller had mentioned earlier that I wasn't aware of, and this will, I think, make you feel good as a council, but there's roughly over 30,000 fire departments in the United States, and according to the data that we have, less than 10% of those actually do strategic planning, and then even a much smaller percentage of those base it on community input. So, which is something that's, again, the accreditation model fosters, and there's actually less than 300 departments in the United States that are accredited. So I say all that not as to be bragging, but just something for you to, as a council, to be proud of, that we are involving the community in that. So with that, I would just ask.
I was going to just say, I know I am, and I believe I can speak for the citizens of Monroe. We are proud that you are accredited. I'm proud that our police department is accredited. And just as you said, 300 across the United States, 300 departments across the United States is accredited. And we're one of those 300. That's a great milestone.
Absolutely.
When you're bragging and telling the truth, you're not bragging.
There you go.
But no, and my next question, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but since you give me the floor, I'll go ahead and ask another question. Have you heard back from you, is it ISO rating?
We have not heard back. We had that survey or inspection back the 1st of December. We should hear back, I'm projecting around the 1st of February. It's typically about 60 days. I am optimistic about that. As you know, we're currently a class 3, and certainly it's certainly my goal to bring that rating down, to make it even better. So we're optimistic about that.
Oh, I'm optimistic. I think you will too. But you know why I'm grinning, I bet. Going back some years back,
Yes.
when we went through the same rating system,
Yes.
and how much work it is to get ready for the people to come in. Then you sit back and wait and hope that you get the rating that you wanted. And I recall us doing that one time.
Absolutely.
And we did get the rating we wanted.
That's exactly right.
We would like to have it lower, but we did get our rating lower, which benefits the entire city, and in most particular, our industry, with the reduction in fire insurance rates.
Absolutely.
And so not only will we help our fire department, but the fire department helps our city. And it's just a good deal, and I believe you'll get the rating lower, and I certainly hope so. That's what I'm thinking about.
Just a real recap on that history, and if memory serves me right, it was 1995, we were able to reduce it from a class 6 to a class 5, and then we had another survey in 2006 and reduced from a class 5 to a class 3. So we hope we stay on that same path. We'll see how
If you don't, I'll come help you.
Thank you.
And you know, I'm kidding, and I do a lot of kidding. I'm saying that just to say, I do recall when we did this together
Absolutely.
one time before.
Absolutely.
It was a great process and it worked.
Absolutely.
I know that has come through for you.
Does the fact that our fire department is accredited also help homeowner policies?
The,
Is that a factor?
the accreditation itself doesn't actually affect the insurance rates. However, many things you do with the accreditation helps with the ISO rating. So just the fact of going through the accreditation process makes the department better in so many ways, and that in itself helps with the ISO grading process. So you typically see accredited departments do better in the ISO gradings. There's not necessarily a direct point benefit, but you tend to see accredited departments do better. And there are many things that we've done through the accreditation process that, you know, has just benefited the community in so many ways, and I think we'll see the benefit of some of that on the grade.
One thing I'd like to see the department do, and I know y'all do a lot, is at some point during the year at these organized neighborhoods to maybe do a session on encouraging them to have a fire plan, escape plan from their homes. Most people don't talk about that. And here lately, I've been seeing so many fires where people are trapped or burned, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have a plan at all. But I think that would be a good outreach to them.
And I think that's an excellent point, excellent suggestion. In fact, that was one of the things that came up in our community stakeholders from yesterday, was that, you know, that public education outreach. So we will continue to do that and focus on that. Absolutely.
You do a lot of that now also, don't you?
We do. We do.
Well, I know you do. I said, yeah, I know you do through the I call it the children's house. What you got, there's a name for it.
Our fire safety house.
Fire safety house. I know you do a lot in all schools, a lot of, but another thing about this rating, and of course, I'm sure y'all probably know. Of course, when they come in, they look at everything. You know, your response time, how many trucks you got, how many people you got. Well, would you get this rate lowered if they come in and give you consideration? What they're really saying also is you're doing something right. Of course, I already know we're doing something right, but I'm just saying that to say I realize that you got a good department, and what you're doing is a good job for the city. Or you certainly, if you didn't have that and you didn't have your personnel, certainly you couldn't get this rated lower. So that's why I think that we'll get it lowered, and I think we're doing great now, Rump, and we appreciate what you do.
And we certainly hope we will. And again, it's not.
Yeah, I'm just not saying concrete.
Don't know for sure that we will, but I'm
We won't know until
hopeful
we
that
ask.
we will.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Any questions from Chief? Other gentlemen? No questions? That's all, isn't it?
Well, thank you, and
we need to
again,
vote
as
on
we
this.
get this plan developed, then we'll bring it back through the Public Safety Committee for any discussion and consideration of adoption, and then bring it back to
Have a
council.
motion.
I don't think you,
And
this is
it's
just
information.
input only.
Yeah,
What's that, council?
Thank you so much.
No, it just says provide input.
Yeah, okay. Usually when I get council action needed, I want to vote. Just covered myself. Thank you, gentlemen. Council have anything else? Nothing, do I have a motion? Oh, no, no.
Yeah, this is one you need to recess.
Don't want a motion. We're gonna do a recess till 6 o'clock.
So moved.
Or actually, you recess until you,
Get to
until
lunch.
until the council adjourns the meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, so we recess at this time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We'll see you back shortly. We'll recess a little bit.
So you can get eat.